Today marks 5 years since our most recent and very public look at American right-wing racism and fascism. The night of August 11th, 2017, when white supremacists descended on Charlottesville, Virginia, for an event they called Unite the Right, a collection of neo-Nazis, right-wing militias, and Ku Klux Klan members. They carried tiki torches and chanted, "Jews will not replace us," marching across the University of Virginia campus, my alma mater. The next day, right-wing extremists violently clashed with counter-protesters. A young woman named Heather Heyer was murdered when a white nationalist plowed his car into a crowd. That open display of right-wing fury was an early sign of a violent rage that's metastasized. Now, with the former president's supporters looking for someone to blame for the search of his Florida compound, the threat of right-wing violence has burst into the open once again. This week, a top comment on the pro-Trump site The Donald simply said, "Lock and load," while users agitated for civil war. Much of that anger is trained at the FBI and the judge who authorized the search at Mar-a-Lago. Vice reports that right-wing extremists have targeted that judge with anti-Semitic attacks and the sharing of personal information. Republican politicians also spread lies and misinformation about the FBI agents who conducted the search, like Steve Scalise, the #2 Republican in the House.
We're very strong supporters of law enforcement, and it concerns everybody if you see some agents go rogue, and if you see an agency that doesn't have the right checks and balances at the top. This is coming
Steve,
from the top.
Who went rogue? They were following a search warrant.
We want to find that out. We want to find that out, and that's why we're asking these questions.
Today, Attorney General Merrick Garland defended the FBI against those attacks as the armed suspect who tried to breach the Cincinnati field office was engaged in a standoff with police. NBC's Ben Collins reports the suspect, identified as Ricky Schiffer, appeared to post online in recent days a desire to kill FBI agents after the former president's compound was searched. NBC News has learned Schiffer was at the Capitol on January 6th. The motive in today's incident remains officially under investigation. Joining me now is Congressman Eric Swalwell of California, a member of the House Judiciary, Intelligence, and Homeland Security Committees. Congressman Swalwell, it's always good to have you on. One of the things that you have always been very candid about and that I've always appreciated is you've talked about the tension that didn't just start outside of Congress, but occurs inside of Congress now. Because you have fellow members who are encouraging this kind of violence, who run campaign ads with this kind of violence, who basically say every single day, hey, I would kill my colleagues if I could. From your perspective, when days like this happen, when you have a would-be terrorist attack the FBI office in Cincinnati, after having just been in a tweet conversation with Marjorie Taylor Greene, how does it feel going back to work? How are you going to feel the next time you go back to work in Congress, knowing that you have colleagues who encourage violent terrorism?
It's sick, Jason. It's sickening where we have arrived. We used to say, well, somebody is going to get killed. Well, people died on January 6th. And today, what is just most intolerable is that for the last 48 hours since the FBI search of Donald Trump's home, you can draw a direct line from what Kevin McCarthy, what Steve Scalise, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lindsey Graham have all said in their threats against law enforcement or the lies that they've told about law enforcement, and what this individual has posted online before he took up arms against the FBI. And it's a little personal for me because I have two brothers who walk the beat as law enforcement officers, and we know that law enforcement, look, these guys, they're not geniuses, you know, they're just targeting law enforcement. So you have a lot of people, you know, wearing the uniform who are sitting ducks right now if someone is fired up and they're being told by Kevin McCarthy that these folks are going rogue or that these folks are planting evidence. It's not like they're going to go look for an FBI agent. They're just going to go after any law enforcement officer they see. And so all law enforcement are at risk. And so this party, by the way, who has told us for so long that they back the blue and the Democrats want to defund the police, when you talk like this, it doesn't sound like you're pro-cop. It sounds like you're pro-coup.
Right. Congressman, you know, one of the things that also I've appreciated about you, I follow you on Twitter, I've tweeted back and forth, is that you're also very candid about how this violence affects you personally. We appreciate the fact, I'm going to play some sound that you have revealed from some of the calls that you get at your office. I want your thoughts on the other side.
First of all, I want to say, not me, but I hope someone cuts that mother throat from ear to ear. Cut his head off. Swalwell's a worthless piece of cut his wife's head off, cut his kids' heads off. I don't give a
I get a lot of difficult emails and phone calls. But Congressman, I've never, ever, as a black man on television, have never received a direct threat that violent. First off, how are you? And second, how common are these kinds of threats and attack? And do you have heightened security at your job in Congress after getting these kinds of messages?
Doing everything I can to protect, my 3 little kids and my wife. And they shouldn't have to live in fear because, their husband or their father, works in public service and has spoken out against the former president. But I'm not going to stop speaking out. And that's why I post these messages, because if you think you're going to intimidate me, you're not. And if you think you're going to intimidate my colleagues in the FBI and the Department of Justice, you're not. But I put those out there to show, one, we're not going to be intimidated. And two, that there is a correlation when America's leaders stoke these conspiracy theories, that these folks receive it as the gospel and they think it's their duty to take up arms. And people have been killed. More people are going to get killed until the lies stop, starting with the big lie that Donald Trump spun after the election, and now the new lies about this FBI search. So, and by the way, Jason, if you're calling me and threatening to kill my family, and oftentimes I get these calls around my position on gun safety legislation, you have proven to me and the world why we need to be more scrutinizing about who can purchase firearms.
I want to ask this. President Biden sort of launched his campaign talking about how we need to recapture the soul of America. We can have policy discussions at any time, but from a character standpoint, from a modeling standpoint, from a rhetorical and moral center standpoint, how good a job do you think he has been as a leader and sort of countering this sort of white nationalist violent insurgency in this country? Do you think that the president has been a good sort of moral lodestone that we can focus on in this time?
Yes, and the best example I can give you is that yesterday I was at the White House as the president signed the PACT Act, which gives relief to veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits, veterans like Beau Biden, the president's son, who died from cancer. And seated just to my left was a congressman from Pennsylvania who the day before was with Donald Trump at Bedminster to show solidarity with Donald Trump after the FBI search. So talk about uniting the country. I mean, this person is working with Donald Trump to, try and defeat Joe Biden, and yet he's at the White House because Joe Biden has brought Republicans and Democrats together on an issue that we all care about. And so, yes, through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the bipartisan gun safety legislation, the bipartisan CHIPS Act to counter China, and the bipartisan PACT Act, he's uniting the country as best he can. And I think that's why it was so important that he won in November 2020.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you so very much for talking to us this evening.